I don't like 3D cinema. Now, the mind is an amazing thing, and I've spoken before about the way in which the mind perceives reality. It seems that some of the aspects of reality, such as what we consider to be time and space, may be less objective realities out there than constructs that our mind places upon the reality that we perceive. Now, I know that's difficult to understand because, in fact, we're built the way we are. We can't actually see the world in any other way or experience time in any other way. But the mind itself can indeed play tricks on us and frequently does. And it's when we look at some of these tricks that perhaps we can begin to understand how some of the constructs that we have about the world around us are, in fact, inside our own head. And our mind actually plays a part, a major part, in constructing the world. Now, eventually, I'm going to get the point that I started this video with, namely that I don't like 3D cinema. And the way to that argument is through considering such things as perspective. Now, consider the words on your screen. When you look at this, all you see is a flat page of text with no perspective. But, on the other hand, when you look at this, you see a page of text with perspective a la Star Wars. Now, by using a couple of simple tricks, it's easy to fool the mind into thinking that what it's looking at is a 3D image. And I would say that this is so because the mind is actually predisposed to interpret the world around it as three-dimensional. This probably has something to do with binocular vision. So when it sees a flat surface with some signals such as decreasing size and those lines along the side, when it sees these signals, it interprets that as a three-dimensional image. Now that's an error because in both cases, when we're looking at that text, we're really simply looking at a flat surface, not at a three-dimensional surface. Yet the mind thinks the second one is a three-dimensional surface. In the ancient world, in the world of art, they began to develop the idea of perspective in painting. Sometime during the Middle Ages, they somewhat lost the art of that. They still understood perspective, but couldn't quite get it right. That was one factor in medieval art that makes it look somewhat odd to us today, as in this image here. Now, it wasn't entirely due to a loss of skill that this happened. It was also, to some extent, a stylistic choice. The choice is made here, for example, to highlight the most important things by making them larger. So the monks in the center of the screen are much bigger than even the horse in front of it, which is obviously, in terms of perspective, closer to the viewer. Here in this painting of the birth of John the Baptist, we can see that the artist is beginning to use perspective, but nevertheless, the bed in the background is much too large and the figure on the bed, with the result that, because we can see some perspective in this picture, the bed looks abnormally large, or it looks as though it's floating above the other figures and is therefore the same distance from us. So again, the mind is trying to interpret this image in terms of what it understands around it as the three-dimensional world. Now take a look at this image. Most of you, when looking at this, will probably initially interpret it as an image of a large monster chasing a smaller monster. However, if you take the measurements, the small monster in front is actually exactly the same size as the large monster behind. Now, our mind again interprets this as a 3D image, not a flat image. And because it's a 3D image, and the monster behind is actually the same size as the monster in front, then our mind does a bit of gymnastics here and actually makes the monster behind look larger, because it ought to, after all, be bigger if it's further away. So our minds are used to interpreting a three-dimensional world, And when we see an image of that world on a flat surface, such as, for example, a photograph or a TV screen, our mind automatically interprets that as three-dimensional. Or consider the example of a mirror. When we look in the mirror, we're actually looking at a flat surface. That image is a flat image, but we have no trouble at all understanding that that is actually three-dimensional, that things that look behind us in the mirror actually are behind us. It would be odd if we didn't see it that way. So my point here is that the mind automatically interprets or tries to interpret flat images as three-dimensional images because that's the template that it has all around it. So now we get to the point of this video about three-dimensional cinema. When I watch a movie on a cinema screen, I know it's a flat screen. My rational mind tells me it's a flat screen. But nevertheless, what I see when I look at that screen is a completely three-dimensional image with no effort whatsoever. So what happens then when I'm presented with a so-called 3D cinema experience? Well, I don't know about you, but when I put those glasses on and the movie starts, initially I'm quite disoriented because what I'm looking at is not what I expect to be seeing. What I expect to be seeing is a normal three-dimensional image on the screen, what to me appears a three-dimensional image. But the glasses and the way the film is produced are making me see something quite different. It really isn't 3D at all and doesn't look like 3D. The way objects look when they come closer to you, all of that is an illusion. And it's not even an accurate illusion. It's not an accurate representation of what the three-dimensional world really looks like. So the experience is initially disorienting and it takes a while to get used to it. It takes a while for the mind to settle down. So what I think actually happens when the mind is confronted with this weird three-dimensional image is that it makes another adjustment. Just as it makes an adjustment regarding the flat screen we're looking at to interpret it as three-dimensional, so also with this weird image that it's being confronted with, it makes an adjustment so that it begins to look more normal as we look at it. So the disorienting effect actually diminishes after a time and we begin to see this as more normal. So what all this suggests to me, in fact, is that 3D glasses and 3D cinema experiences, one, are not 3D, probably less so than just looking at the screen itself. Also that they're completely unnecessary precisely for that reason, because when we look at the movie screen, just as when we look in the mirror, our mind automatically sees a three-dimensional image and it doesn't need any assistance to do that.